If you feel like you need a translator every time you grab your anatomy textbook from the superior shelf of your bookcase and open up that anterior cover, don't worry, I got you. In this video, we're going to learn to become fluent in the language of anatomy so it doesn't sound all Greek or Latin to you. Welcome to Unstoppable AF Anatomy and Fitness. My name's Melissa, but in this suit, you should probably call me Boney M. Or, if you're a little more rap and a little less disco, I also identify as the real Slim Lady. And the real Slim Lady says, please stand up, please stand up, please stand up. And while you're standing, get yourself up nice and tall, feet forward, eyes forward, and your palms forward. You, my friends, have just hit anatomical position. Well, it might feel a lot cooler to be like this, or with one of your fingers on each hand up. Anatomical position is going to be our starting reference point when we're talking about directional terms in this video and when we talk about joint movements in some of our other videos. From anatomical position, we're going to be talking about terms that come up in pairs and mean the opposite things of each other. So our first pair of terms is going to be anterior and posterior. Anterior meaning something that's more on the front, posterior meaning something that's more toward the back. We can use these terms to describe structures in relation to each other, or these terms are often used when we're naming anatomical structures. So if we check out my sternum here, we could say that my sternum, check it out, is anterior to my spine. My spine is posterior to my sternum. So using those terms to describe those structures in relation to each other. Or if we look at the knee joint, for instance, maybe you're watching sports highlights later tonight and you see, oh no, your favorite athlete goes down with an anterior cruciate ligament injury. The anterior cruciate ligament is a ligament in our knee, and anterior tells us that it's attaching onto the front side of the knee joint. If we have an ACL, anterior cruciate ligament, we also have a posterior cruciate ligament, a PCL. And that posterior cruciate ligament, posterior tells us it's going to be attaching onto the back side of the knee. If you're coming from more of a biology background, you might be more familiar with the terms ventral and dorsal. Ventral meaning more toward the front, more anterior, dorsal meaning more toward the back, more posterior. So thinking of like a dorsal fin coming out the back of a whale or a dolphin. Anterior or ventral is going to be more toward the front. And I like to think ventral, I think about our lungs as vents. So we breathe in, we breathe out, and we vent that air out the front side of our body. So ventral is coming out the front side of the body. I mean, technically, we do also vent some air out the back, but you'll keep your study buddies around a little bit longer if you can learn to control that one and vent most of your air out the front. Friendly suggestion. Our next pair of terms is medial and lateral. Medial means something that's closer to the midline. So if you imagine this midline running all the way through the center of your body, through the nose, through the sternum, through the vertebral column, through the spine, and falling equally between both feet, something that's more medial is going to be closer to the midline. Something that's more lateral is going to be further from the midline. So again, looking at the sternum, we could say my sternum is medial to my shoulder. My shoulder is lateral to my sternum. Within the knee, we also have a medial collateral ligament, MCL, and we have a lateral collateral ligament. So the medial collateral ligament is going to be the one that's closer to the midline. It's on the inside of the knee, right there. The lateral collateral ligament is going to be the one that's on the outside of the knee. Our next pair of terms is superior and inferior. Superior meaning above or higher than, inferior meaning below or lower than. So if you got a couple of screws up in your head loose, we could say the head is superior to the sternum. The sternum is inferior to the head. Again, if you're coming from more of a biology background, you may be more familiar with the terms cranial and caudal. Cranial meaning closer to the head, caudal meaning closer to the tail. The terms superior and inferior relate to our axial skeleton. Our axial skeleton we can think of like our core center axis. So our head, our vertebral column, and our ribs that wrap around to the front onto the sternum. Our appendicular skeleton includes our appendages, so our upper and lower extremities, as well as the bones that attach those onto the axial skeleton. When we're talking about our appendicular skeleton, about our extremities, rather than using the terms superior and inferior, we use the terms proximal and distal. Something that's more proximal is going to be more in the proximity. Something that's more distal is going to be further in the distance. And the reference point here is in relation to the torso. So something that's more proximal is going to be closer in its attachment point to the torso. Something that's more distal is going to be further away. It's going to be more in the distance. So if we look at our elbow, for example, we could say that the elbow is distal to the shoulder. So the elbow is further away, it's more in the distance than the shoulder. The shoulder is closer to the attachment point onto the torso, but the elbow is proximal to the fingers. The fingers are the most distal point. All right, so we use the terms proximal and distal to relate to structures on the appendages, on the appendicular skeleton. Our last pair of terms is superficial and deep. Superficial meaning something that's more external, deep meaning something that's more internal. So when we look at this fancy suit here, we can see some bones and muscles. Pec major, for example, is a muscle that sits on top of the rib cage. It sits externally, it's more superficial. The heart and the lungs, however, are deep inside of our rib cage. So the ribs are superficial to our internal organs, but the ribs are deep to the pectoralis major. Having a solid understanding of these terms is really going to help you as you work through learning anatomy. The Real Slim Lady is willing to bet that there is at least one of these terms on every single page of your anatomy textbook. I hope you're feeling more fluent in reading body language. If you're feeling unstoppable AF, look for that virtual Polex to throw me a thumbs up and use those digits to hit subscribe and share with a friend. We'll see you next time. Do 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 do.